People still seem to beg the question of me, why the fuck do I have so much love for ZX, or X1 for that matter? Since 90% of it relates to my feelings towards taking your franchise in a genuinely fresh direction, I figured I'd spend a bit of time talking about that instead of trying to pretend that there's 8 minutes worth of poignant commentary detailing 5 refights and the 2 screen-wide interludes that connect them. Everyone's already heard me gush about X1 as my favorite game, and they've also realized the principal reasons behind this extend beyond empirical qualities like the gameplay and the stage or boss design. X1 is one of the only Mega Man games where the mood is a significant aspect. In the original series, the draw was continuously inventive stage design and an addictive, time-tested gameplay system. They were the epitome of the best NES platformers. Simple, polished, and incredibly fun to play no matter how many times you went through them. By the time the SNES rolled around, platformers as a whole seemed to be all about taking a more developed tone, with an atmospheric graphical design and each well-known example having a specifically unique feel to it, and something that did better than any other platformer to help cement it as something to remember. But unlike in other series that continue to hold a uniquely immersive feel, I think X1 is the only game in its series that had a sort of unique mood to it like I've detailed so much in the past. Other games held up the smoothly paced action and excellent design, but they never seemed to hold the epic atmosphere of the first. I think, even outside of the uniqueness to X1's presentation, a big portion of why the atmosphere is missing to me from other X games, and the Zero series for that matter, is because of my bias towards repetition. It just goes hand in hand to me. Just like I'd say that continuous retreads of the original series by the time we passed 3 diminished the impact of its innovations and its creative design, the X series also started to lose steam as more and more of what had proven to work in the past was recycled. By X8, the caliber of the action and the fast-paced gameplay was still upheld, but that wasn't enough to stop it from feeling forgettable to me because I'd seen so much of it before. I find that this seems to happen a lot with me concerning many long-lasting series, and the feeling of any game in that series sparking it in a new direction loses more of its impact on me as future games follow that same direction, whether they fine-tune the concepts introduced or not. This feeling is pretty much the core of why I have opinions that the bulk of people seem to disagree with, like X5 being better than X4 simply for being as bold as it was, and that Legends of ZX are at the very top of quality. Okay, so I'm completely fucking lying when I say Legends being amazing is an unpopular idea, but you get what I mean. Both games took a repetitive concept and reimagined it in their own way, kinda like X1 did to the original series. It's also why a game like the first Mega Man Zero doesn't quite do it for me as well as other reimaginings of the series have. I think the back-to-basics appeal of Zero didn't impact me as much as it did other people, and it almost seemed to be going backwards with familiar level design and mechanics. That's why I like Zero 2 so much over the original, because it not only filled out the ideas that Zero introduced, but it created a good amount of gimmicks and stage concepts we hadn't entirely seen before. ZX is a game that takes this notion and runs with it all the way. It takes the core that the Zero series built and it brings it to an evolved direction. The obvious thing is the biometal system, and it's entirely fresh as far as the main series in this franchise go, not only introducing several new armors, but also the ability to switch between those armors on the fly. ZX also has what's probably only a major benefit in my own opinion, but is an interconnected world in which all the missions and stages take place. This is something Zero 1 toyed with to sometimes stale effect and then was dropped from the other 3 to bring it back to what they know worked. People argue that the system was sloppy, especially the map system, and I guess it was. But I think the immersion that comes with eliminating the tried and true stage select system makes the world ZX take place in feel more complete. And I also think that the pacing with which the mission system and the side quests take place complement the feeling quite well. Small things like the idea of strategically killing a boss and the sheer amount of small but varying things you have to do throughout the game also help the mood. I think that the mission system, which I guess has been explored in Mega Man games before but not quite this elaborately, also complements the equally creative stage designs, which again, due to the interconnectivity, I love re-exploring to uncover new secrets and areas. These are all pretty minute praises and they don't even entail all the details of the game, but really, the major point, besides the biometals and the sheer amount of moves and abilities they entail, is that ZX feels most like a polished combination and evolution of both the X series and the Zero series, and I'll always defend the Zero series as having been somewhat incomplete. Now how exactly does this tie back into X1, besides the fact that I think both games really did breathe life into the franchise? Well, the biggest lasting appeal is that outside of Legends and X1, ZX is the only Mega Man game I do feel carries a unique atmosphere to it. It's really similar to those two in that it has a mostly entirely new setting, new enemies, new toys, and new systems to play with. And to me, a great sense of progression that results from both the pace of the story, the interconnectivity of the world, the caliber of the stage designs themselves, and was my favorite soundtrack outside of the original X. ZX might as well be the X1 of modern consoles to me, because it brought back that same feeling of immersion as a result of both its quality and its uniqueness. Like with X1, I'm not nominating ZX for nuanced plot of the fucking century or anything, it's still a Capcom game. I'm just saying that there's a deliberate feel to how great design, pacing, and new ideas work together to create the mood behind the game. Again, because this is so opinionated, it's still pretty hard to justify exactly what I mean when I say these are my favorites. But hell, I tried. Outside of that though, and getting back to the fact that I think ZX is one of the few games that really did evolve the franchise, is that it finally brings a truly realized difficulty. This is easily one of the hardest Mega Man games there is when you play it on hard mode, and for once it's not dependent on how much you limit yourself or how you approach it. It's just a legitimate, well-crafted challenge. It's like what X6 wanted to be. At the same time, easy mode is good for beginners and still not nearly as easy as some of the early X games, and normal mode is just for fans of the series who don't want to drive themselves nuts. Honestly though, blasting through the final areas and the secret boss on hard mode brought back an exhilaration I don't really feel as freshly as I did playing this with Mega Man games anymore. With all of my justifying, that's really the opinionated truth behind it. ZX just reminds me of the exhilaration and the immersion I felt when I played X1 or Legends for the first time. No matter what the sequels to all three of these games do to improve upon them technically, they can't touch the mood of the originality set up for them. As always, this is just me ranting about what I think, so if I contradicted myself or pissed you off, by all means call me on it somewhere down the road so I can, I don't know, feel humble or something. It's all just personal asides in the end. Anyway, D-Rex is hardly the be-all end-all worry at the end of this nightmare. He might have been a challenge at some point in design, but I guess they forgot to give him anything resembling a real hitbox, so you can basically fuck about on the left side of the screen all you want and just dodge the odd attack that'll actually contact X. It helps that they programmed him to use one of the easiest to dodge attacks in the game about twice as commonly as anything threatening. This battle becomes a joke when you realize that the only thing you need to worry about when he moves is the bottom half rushing into you. As long as you're on the left edge, his top will never hit you since it never crashes completely down unless you run directly under it. Anyway, next up is the rather lackluster final segment. I do try to play around with Sigma as much as I can, but there's really only so much you can do to a guy with 3 attacks to make him tolerable. See you for that.